This season of the show is a mess. Everyone is walking around like a caricature of themselves. Homelander is a narcissist with daddy issues. Frenchie is an addict. Sage is a tortured genius. Huey is the innocent bunny. MM tries to be tough, but his heart of gold gets in the way. So does Starlight, but she's less experienced. Soldier Boy fucks old bitches, and Butcher is a fucking cunt. Everything is back exactly to how it was when the team first assembled, somehow, after a year's worth of bullshit has happened off screen, and the last things to happen on screen tore the team apart. The writing is worse, the sex jokes are worse, everything is just slowly pulling itself apart. Off the bat, Soldier Boy. Why is he so relevant? He was one of my favorite characters in season 3, I'll grant you that. That would be why. But Jensen Ackles does not justify turning the entirety of season 5 into a stealth pilot of Vault Rising brought to you by Amazon Prime. Even if that pilot is as stealthy as a semi truck drunk driving down the local expressway. Soldier Boy fucking despises Homelander. We spent all of season 3 establishing that the only person he might hate as much as Homelander is Butcher for betraying him and teaming up with his pathetic excuse for a son. Soldier Boy was the first character we've seen put the beats on Homelander in a way that has not happened before or since, and completed his character arc in season 3 by acknowledging that his father failed him, but Homelander was failed before he could ever be a father. So why, now, is he suddenly so flip-floppy on Homelander that he spends the entirety of the V1 retrieval mini-arc trying to keep Homelander from getting the stuff, only to flip and give it to him anyway? Vault Rising, brought to you by Amazon Prime. Sorry. Stormfront. Lara. Lady Liberty, from Season 2. Godolkin's wife who outlived him through the V1 that made her immortal, who was only established as a fuck buddy who founded Herogasm with Soldier Boy in Season 3. Suddenly, Soldier Boy cares so much about Vault Rising, brought to you by Amazon Prime. Clara, that he's willing to reverse course again on helping Homelander when Sage sets the two up with a porno of Homelander fucking Stormfront's emaciated body. But then give him the V1 he was so certain he didn't want Homelander to get that he literally got his mind read and was planning on getting it so he could prevent Homelander from having it. And in the end, Soldier Boy, after admitting he wants to fuck off to Bogota, calls Homelander a weird fuck and a narcissist to his face one more time before attempting to abandon him again. Did he think that was going to go well? Of course it doesn't. But when Homelander starts choking him out from behind, he just feebly attempts to claw his hand away instead of any number of things. I don't know, flipping him over his shoulder, trying to get back up. Or the really, really obvious option that he picked before when people, including Homelander, tried to sneak him the first time, frying the V out of Homelander's system. I'm not going back in the fucking ice again. Sorry, buddy. Sad to see you changed your mind. Then there's Sage. Sage. Sister Sage is forced to be a walking disaster, but worse, she is forced to be a bland one. Sage's biggest weakness isn't emotion, it's that she's only capable of being as intelligent as the writing is good. And to her own detriment, she highlights the issues of the writing. Everything she did is riddled with contrivance after contrivance. She's shown as able to easily account for Homelander's emotional outbursts, whiplash, and terrible personality and decision making, managing to have concocted a plan that perfectly incorporated it all. So why does her plan suddenly fall apart when it comes to emotion? She's worried about Soldier Boy's death when Homelander lets him out. Then worried about his continuing to live when the V1 stuff pops off. Needs Ashley 2's help to figure out his evidently enigmatic personality. Then decided that everything Homelander was doing was too much and she needed to go cash in her chips with the boys instead. Then she reveals that she was involved to Homelander through her Taco Bell receipts. Then her plan for unlimited American cracker genocide ends when Soldier Boy and Bombsight suddenly have a heart-to-heart and he gives Homelander the V1, the thing he's been adamantly against doing this entire time because his character has been retconned. It was sloppy on Sage's end to let Homelander know that she was behind it all, even if it was ego, because that reason would have been able to let Homelander give actual reason to a not retcon Soldier Boy that Sage, the person he already does not respect, is actively being disrespectful towards him to manipulate him. Even Sage wasn't smart enough to see past the fails in the writer's room. That's also something that bothers me. Her dropping cracker in the context of these white boys fighting to the death. Calling them crackers is completely fine. These are some white bread, 1920s ass white boys. Transatlantic accent ass white boys. But Sage's racial comeuppance is completely unearned. Her anger at the racial stuff is played out only as a minimal thorn in her side and is otherwise completely ignored. Small things like people calling her Sister Sage and comments from Soldier Boy she doesn't really regard otherwise. And considering she says it to MM, the best idea is that she's attempting to play at what she may or may not know about his past regarding Soldier Boy to get him to not intervene. But the second that the writers have that shit come out of her mouth, we knew her plan was done. We just weren't completely sure how yet. Sage does not touch on the race shit at all for herself, very specifically hating humanity in general. But the race dynamics in the show are very, very, very weird. So when they let this sister call them white boys cracker instead of making a plan to assure that Homelander wouldn't get his hands on the V, that shit was a wrap. It was done. So after this, she's saddled with the boys because Homelander knew she was affiliated with them. Her plan A that accounted for everything in season 4 failed because of Gen V and Homelander shenaniganry, and her plan B immediately flopped because she got cocky. So instead of doing anything meaningful, she lobotomizes herself in a room full of piss and snacks and watches Love Island, bossing them around and not actually contributing when Frenchie begs her for help besides the initial plan. If Frenchie's death is what motivates her to get more involved, why? Was it his appeal to love? Sure. Because not letting her very important plan be dissolved in the first place wasn't as important as this obnoxious Frenchman begging in her ear when she ignored him the first time. is another great example for me of the really, really weird race and disability writing in the show. In Gen V, we get a very, very long, very uncomfortable section of a white woman being black bagged and sent to a black site where she has to deal with what is clearly supposed to evoke imagery of ICE detention and or political imprisonment. Meanwhile, in The Boys, we see Huey, Frenchie, and get sent to a freedom camp, a literal, actual concentration camp, and the whole shit is played for laughs. Even still, this relatively lax environment, all things considered, is what drives to magically have his OCD cured? He starts binging the smuggled liquor, becoming a hard ass that reminds everyone around of Butcher. He has continued to be the Heart of Gold through the entire series, but his character regression is moved off screen only for us to immediately retread the plot beats that made him the Heart of Gold we all already knew. Look at how he treated A-Train, or tried to temper Butcher's temper. We all already knew this. Was a medic who worked out in the field alongside Marines, was willing to knock out a racist commanding officer, and made a career as a CO in a prison, but a year in what looks like the most amicable prison camp imaginable is what got him to magically get over his OCD. Not fighting in presumably real wars, probably the Middle East, the same way Butcher did, dealing with the conditions it would take to roll in the same field as Marines on mission, but having to watch Dawn of the Seven every night was what finally broke him. This, of course, also occurs over the year-long time skip. Now, no meds, no therapy, just a year dealing with stress that would presumably make his symptoms worse. He is drinking toilet water, chiefing off Annie's burnt ass vape, and walking around as Rockhard ejaculates in the room. Why? Because not seeing his family anymore was enough. I know people with OCD. I deal with OCD. I'm not gonna lie to you. Maybe it's because I haven't had an experience as debilitating as MM over here. But the idea of not being able to see my family anymore helping me get over my obsessive thoughts and compulsive behaviors is absurd. We see he's lying a little bit later when they run the bit with him seeing She-Line's litter box or having to throw the rat at her, but that's it. He wants a wipe to clean his hands when he picks up a random rodent. That's the evidence that his OCD is still lying there. Come on. Then there's everything with Countess Crow, showing that he's not a super hard ass like Butcher, just for him to continue to try to be and have the legend tell him it doesn't fit him. We all already knew that. MM already knew that. MM in the past wouldn't have needed a slap in the face from the legend to tell him he's being a real piece of shit. But the MM who suffered from a complete year of off-screen character regression, who needs to undergo the exact same character arc we've seen, that MM probably did need it, I guess. Another character who really sets off my alarm bells about how they write both black characters and the disabled is Noir. Bro used to have narcolepsy. Would randomly pass out whether he gets too excited or there's not enough stimulation or anything. It's gone. It's completely vanished season 5. It doesn't matter because they really don't have him do that much, if at all, on screen. But it's very obnoxious that something even played as a gag that was part of the reason why the boys managed to get away in the last season is just completely absent this time. So his narcolepsy's gone. But it's not just his disability. His ability to use his powers on screen disappeared with it. We hear him mention flying away from the pipeline after sabotaging it, and that's it. That's it. None of the super strength or durability that allowed him to be a threat and imitate the original Black Noir. He just commits a fish genocide and is unceremoniously choked to death by the Deep. The same thing happens here that happened with Homelander and Soldier Boy, actually. A character who just did something wildly disrespectful at best or flat out despicable at worst, in Noir's case, to someone who they know is a loose cannon turns their back on that person or allows them to get behind them and they are unceremoniously dispatched. Y'all couldn't afford to hitch another cable to Noir, fly him around the room, slam around a little bit. Kimiko, though, is probably the most egregious example of the lack of care regarding disability in the show, in my opinion. There would have been no good way to make her talk. If she continued to only be able to sign for the rest of the show, that would have been perfectly fine. If the writer's room really felt compelled to allow her to talk, why would they develop that off-screen? It gets introduced to us in a gag through Butcher when the two of them fight when they reunite, and explained away as vocal therapy and therapy and so much fucking TikTok. But that completely kills it. Why would they off-screen something that would be so fundamental to the character and has been so fundamental to the character? Especially since she is seen still reverting to sign language in moments of intense stress or emotion or pain. So what compelled them to not at least allow us to see some development? Was it because they wanted to pay lip service to the fact that Kimiko wanted, at least somewhat, to be a regular person again and thus put in the legwork to get better, while actually trivializing the therapeutic process and the work it takes by having it happen in the magical year between the last season and this one? Probably. That year seems to be where everything interesting went to die. When it comes to the race shit, my final meaningful gripe would probably have to be A-Train. I think his arc as a character from start to finish is probably my favorite in the show, rivaled maybe only by the Deep. A-Train starts as a pompous asshole, a drug addict obsessed with maintaining his image at any cost. The show does great things with them, hiding his brother who really helped push him to be the great he is in a single parent household and lying about where he's from to have a The Blind Side style background. Only son to a drug addict raised from the slums by a random white guy, and both him and Vaught seeking to play up his inauthentic attachment to blackness through things like
A Train to Africa
and his new suit design. They perfectly turn his trajectory around when they have him kill Blue Hawk, a markedly racist soup with a penchant for maiming black civilians, including his brother, only to get his heart as a second chance to use it to the fullest. I mean, I think he does. We see him rescue somebody, help out MM, and then, oh, you guessed it, do a bunch of shit off screen in the year where Annie is running around being the hero they won't let her be on screen anymore. Then he dies rescuing the boys from the concentration camp. They don't let his face turn sit nearly long enough. The death was great, it was earned, it was a deserved redemption. But they just hit the switch to turn him into a hero, had him do a couple little things, and then put him down. At least he got a satisfying conclusion, spitting vitriol in the face of Homelander after sacrificing himself to end in a better way than he began, crashing through a forest to spare the life of an innocent girl, not at all embroiled in the chicanery he's found himself knee-deep in. Then there's Butcher. Billy fucking Butcher. The way they ignore all the tension and setup of season 4, clearly posing Butcher as probably a secondary antagonist and protagonist only because he's still going to be working parallel to the boys to kill Homelander, just to have him one last ride the whole group back together with nothing other than a couple of hiccups and bumps in the road. Come on. There's no real blowback for killing Newman other than her husband and daughter destroying the last samples of a virus that they had more of anyway, which ended up not mattering because Homelander got the V1, which still shouldn't matter because Marie Moreau was pitched as a real solution to the Homelander equation, which... What was I saying again? Oh, fuck, that's right. Just like in this segment, Butcher and his plotline were absolutely sidelined to make way for shoehorning in the stealth pilot for Vault Rising, brought to you by Amazon Prime. Butcher's strength is neutered throughout. The issues he was having with Negan over there, irrelevant, except for a little bit through a psychic that Huey immediately saw through anyway. He broke out when Huey was passed out too, and they just slapped bigger shackles on him. The cancer, irrelevant, except for an indescribably homoerotic exchange between Butcher and Homelander that still might be the best scene in the season, carried solely by the actors, mind you. Starlight gets to actually use her powers on screen. Butcher gets to show why he was actually the mastermind behind the boys. Anthony Starr gets to steal the show with a lick of his lips and a call of devotion, and it all culminates in the chase between Homelander and A-Train. I assume that chase segment took half the VFX budget for the season, the other half going to Homelander nutting those lasers after injecting the V1. Or maybe the budget went to buying real uranium for the chambers. Either way, the only antagonism we see from Butcher this season is him lying to Ryan, which ends in him getting his ass pulverized by his dad and threatening to kill Kimiko and Starlight, which he's been doing since the start of the show. Nothing new. And then there's Starlight. Sorry, I was so distracted by the stealth pilot of Vault Rising brought to you by Amazon Prime that I couldn't stay on track. Starlight's characterization is kind of stagnant, I would say. I like Huey being her reason for continuing on instead of the usual, my woman is the reason I continue to live, that these superhero media tend to have. He inspires hope in her, which is cool. But the only thing we've seen from her for a while is another really weird race political dynamic thing. where they have a cop come to her family's home and harass these white people like an SS officer expecting a home or an ICE agent looking for migrants, and her continuing to question why she does any of this when so many people hate her. Every episode that heavily involves her has her just wanting to give up someone inspiring her, her getting shot on before she can use her powers because evidently it's not in the special effects budget after episode 1, and repeat. And they make her the scapegoat for what I'm still going to assume is them cutting Gen V's cast out of the season. Really just fucked. Kinda sad and a little obnoxious. Wonder how much of that has to do with the stealth pilot for Vault Rising brought to you by Amazon Prime, as opposed to Gen V's low numbers? That is why it got canceled. It probably scared the suit, so they had to write their asses out. There's a bunch of other shit I have issue with. Marie Moreau, as the only other Odessa baby, should have had a much bigger presence this season, especially after the virus that was less a virus and more a soup-hunting biological weapon completely petered out. And after Ryan was here for like an episode total, got his shit kicked in and left. This is all not to say, of course, that all the writing this season was trash. I really liked the anthology-esque episode. Mostly. I didn't give a fuck about the supernatural reunion, but I acknowledge that it added to the Homelander Soldier Boy dynamic, in my opinion, at the cost of Soldier Boy's characterization. The terror angle was interesting, but it just being everyone getting chummy again after the hot mess of the episode where they were all forced to be excessively angry at each other was a bit obnoxious to me. The tension was real, it was present, and it came to a head in the previous episode. Not coming from nothing, but it kind of feels like the writers just use it as a cover for all the issues people have with characterization and interaction in the writing instead. Sorry, I'm supposed to be complimenting the writing. I got a bit sidetracked. Probably because of Vault Rising, brought to you by Amazon Prime. What was I talking about? Firecracker. Firecracker's focus was probably the single best piece of writing in the entire season. Showing her completely betraying her faith, where she came from, and everything she stood for, giving her literal heart and immortal soul to Homelander only for it to not be enough. Mwah. The brewing conflict between her and O-Father and their different kinds of evangelism, great. O-Father and her both being true believers in God and the faith, but O-Father clearly seeing an opportunity to both indulge his vices and get out of a terrible jam because of the amount of debt he'd accrued blowing the profits of his megachurch. Fantastic. Interesting dichotomy at play between that and Firecracker's faith being tested when her old priest comes begging for her to help him, especially after she's already been outed as a pedophile. It implies a relationship there that gives a great color to her background that isn't just an orange prison jumpsuit. Great piece of writing. At the end of it all, her being killed by the left wing of the statue that Homelander impales her on is the cherry on top. That's really good. I cackled when I realized, I'm not gonna lie. That being said, I'm willing to discredit every single bit of praise I can lob at the show if it lets me shit on the worm. I fucking hate the smarmy and infuriating writer self-insert. Every single time he shows up, he's talking about how hard and underappreciated it is to be a writer. How impossible it is for people to be happy with the ending to a show. We get it, guys. You know people are going to be mad. Am I falling for it? Yes. Do I care? Yes. Yes, I do. Because this show was great at a point. And now I have a literal dirt-eating dork telling me how I should be groveling at his feet because he's bothering to write what I'm looking at. And don't think that you're slick with that production of Homelander and Jesus either. I know that's just the in-universe production notes, but having a series of notes about the lack of VFX in your ad just pulls my attention away from Vault Rising, brought to you by Amazon Prime. I'm not really interested in seeing the VCU continue, especially after the cancellation of Gen V Season 3. Shout out that entire cast, Andre especially being my favorite. They deserved way better. All of them. They really did. I fucking hate the worm. I hate the worm so bad. Oh, I hate the worm. Oh my god. And make sure to watch Vault Rising, brought to you by Amazon Prime.